The wind came first, sweeping through the main street of Red Hollow like a warning no one wanted to hear. Dust curled around the boots of men who had stopped walking, stopped talking, stopped breathing properly. Every eye was fixed on the rancher standing near the well, his shadow long and sharp against the sunburned wood. Silas Boone had always been a quiet man. Not weak, never that, but quiet in the way storms are quiet before they break. And right now the town felt that break coming. "Please don't do that." The voice trembled, and it wasn't just fear. It was disbelief. Clara Whitmore stood a few steps away, her hands clenched in front of her, as if holding herself together required physical effort. She wasn't begging for herself alone. She was begging for the town, for the fragile order that kept Red Hollow from tearing itself apart. Silas didn't look at her right away. His jaw tightened. His fingers flexed once. The sheriff stood frozen. The preacher swallowed hard. And even the men who had once laughed at Silas now felt something cold crawl up their spines, because they all knew what was about to happen, and because they knew exactly why. 3 days earlier, a body had been found near the creek, young, beaten, left like trash. The town had whispered, then lied, then looked away. Everyone knew who was responsible. Everyone knew why nothing had been done. Power lived in Red Hollow, and it wore expensive boots and false smiles. The law here bent easily. Morality bent faster. Silas Boone had buried his brother that morning. He finally turned to Clara, his eyes dark, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "I asked this town to do the right thing," he said quietly. "I asked once." The man behind him, the one tied to the post, began to shake. He had laughed before. He wasn't laughing now. "Silas!" the sheriff tried, his voice weak. "This isn't the way." Silas smiled then, not with joy, with certainty. "It's the only way you left me." The town held its breath as Silas reached for the lever. Clara stepped forward again, tears in her eyes now. "Please," she whispered, "if you do this, there's no going back." Silas met her gaze at last. "I know." And then he did it anyway. The sound that followed wasn't loud, but it echoed louder than any gunshot Red Hollow had ever heard. People gasped. Someone screamed. Others turned away. Some watched, unable to look elsewhere. Justice had just crossed a line, or maybe it had erased one. Silas stepped back, the dust settling around him. The truth impossible to ignore now. The rancher who had never raised his voice had just shattered the town's silence. Red Hollow would never be the same. And deep down, everyone knew it deserved what was coming next. Before the scene fades, the narrator's voice cuts in, low and deliberate. By sunset, the town was split clean down the middle, like a log struck by a perfect axe. Some called Silas a murderer. Others called him the only honest man left in Red Hollow. No one called him innocent. And that was the problem. Silas didn't run. He returned to his ranch, unsaddled his horse, and sat on the porch as the sky burned orange and red, like the world itself was passing judgment. He knew they would come. He just didn't know who would lead them. Clara arrived before anyone else. She didn't bring words this time, just truth. "They're forming a mob," she said. "Not all of them, but enough." Silas nodded. "Good." She stared at him. "Good?" "For years," he replied, "they hid behind fear. Now they have to face something." "What if they hang you?" she asked. "Then maybe the next man will think twice before hurting. Someone who can't fight back." The mob reached the ranch just as night fully settled. Torches flickered. Voices argued. The sheriff tried once more to restore order. But order had already died in Red Hollow. It just took time to notice. Silas stood when they called his name. No gun in his hand, no plea on his lips. And then something unexpected happened. One man stepped forward, then another still. Not to seize Silas, but to stand beside him. Men who had lost sons. Women who had been silenced. People who had been told to forget. The mob faltered. Red Hollow saw itself clearly for the first time. By morning, the town made a choice. Not a clean one, not an easy one, but a real one. Silas would face judgment, but not from a rope and not from lies. The truth would finally be spoken aloud. As Silas was led away, Clara walked beside him. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. Silas looked back at the town, the buildings, the people. the future uncertain but awake at last. "No," he said. "I regret that it took this long." The story closes with the narrator's voice, steady and inviting. Dawn did not arrive gently in Red Hollow. It crept in like a witness that did not want to testify, pale light slipping over rooftops, over the empty street where the well still stood, and over the truth that could no longer be buried. Silas Boone spent that morning in a narrow holding room behind the sheriff's office. Not in chains, not beaten, not even guarded closely. The town didn't know what to do with a man who had forced it to look at itself. He sat on a wooden bench, hat resting on his knees, eyes forward, breathing steady. For the first time since his brother's death, the weight on his chest felt different, not lighter but honest. Outside, Red Hollow argued with itself. Voices rose from doorways, from the saloon, from the church steps. Some demanded punishment. Others demanded protection. A few demanded forgiveness, though they didn't quite understand what that word meant yet. The name Silas Boone moved through the town like a spark. Dangerous, necessary, impossible to ignore. And above it all hovered a fear no one said out loud. If Silas was wrong, then they were safe. But if Silas was right, then they were complicit. By midday, a rider arrived from the neighboring county. His horse was lathered, his coat fine, his eyes sharper than anyone in Red Hollow liked. He brought papers, authority, and a smile that did not reach his eyes. The killing, he said, would be handled properly now, by outside law, by people who had no history here, no blood in the soil. Some townsfolk relaxed at that. Others felt sick, because they knew what properly often meant. Quiet deals, clean paperwork, and a return to comfortable silence. Silas was brought out to stand in the open. The rider looked him over like livestock. "You admit what you did?" he asked. Silas did not hesitate. "I do." Gasps rippled. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. "And you'd do it again?" The rider pressed. Silas lifted his eyes, not in defiance, but in truth. "If the law keeps failing the innocent," he said, "then yes." That was when something shifted for good. An older woman stepped forward from the crowd. Then another. Then a man with a limp. Then a boy barely old enough to shave. One by one, voices broke the silence. Stories poured out, beatings ignored. Threats dismissed, crimes erased by money or influence. The rider's smile vanished. This was no longer a single rancher. This was an entire town confessing. The rider folded his papers slowly. He had not come prepared for this. By evening, the decision was made. Not quietly, not cleanly, but honestly. Silas Boone would not be executed, nor freed as if nothing had happened. Instead, Red Hollow would be placed under review, its leaders removed, its law rewritten under scrutiny, and Silas would walk free, not as a hero, not as a criminal, but as a reminder. When Silas stepped back onto the dirt road, the town parted for him. Some nodded, some wept. Some could not meet his eyes. Clara stood waiting. "You changed everything," she said softly. Silas looked around once more, the wind lifting dust into the fading light. "No," he replied. "I just stopped pretending." As he walked away toward his ranch, the narrator's voice closes the chapter, firm and unforgettable. Sometimes justice doesn't whisper. Sometimes it shocks an entire town awake. If stories like this make you feel something real, don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might ask the same question, and your answer might matter.